Since the earliest days, the church has recognized that the letter to the Hebrews was written by Paul. Some argue against it because of the difference of writing style and such. But there being a difference isn't really an issue because so much of Paul's attention was towards the Gentile world, and you speak to one people differently than you speak to others. So in the letter to the Hebrews, Paul is speaking specifically to a Jewish audience. So he uses a lot of names, places, approaches, thoughts, worldviews from a Jewish perspective. So we read, "By faith Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He considered the reproach of Christ greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward. By faith he left Egypt, not being afraid of the anger of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. By faith he kept the Passover and sprinkled the blood, so that the destroyer of the firstborn might not touch them. By faith the people crossed the Red Sea as on dry land, but the Egyptians, when they attempted to do the same, were drowned. By faith the walls of Jericho fell down, after they had been encircled for 7 days. By faith Rahab the prostitute did not perish with those who were disobedient, because she had given a friendly welcome to the spies. And what more shall I say? For time would fail me to tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, of David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, enforced justice, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, were made strong out of weakness, became mighty in war, put foreign armies to flight. Women received back their dead by resurrection. Some were tortured, refusing to accept release, so that they might rise again to a better life. Others suffered mockings and flogging, and even chains and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawn in two, they were killed with a sword. They went about in skins of sheep, of goats, destitute, afflicted, mistreated, of whom the world was not worthy, wandering about in deserts and mountains and in dens and caves of the earth. And all these, though commended through their faith, did not receive what was promised, since God had provided something better for us, that apart from us they should not be made perfect. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God." So, Paul, speaking to a Jewish audience, appeals back to those noteworthy people of faith in their history. He speaks about Moses rejecting the pleasures and comforts of sin in the house of Pharaoh in the land of Egypt, how he did not fear the anger of the king, but he fled to the desert where he encountered God, and God urged him to return to rescue his people and bring them out of that slavery and into the land that was theirs in Canaan. So the people of God, the Hebrews at that time, trusted God. They believed in this leader that he had raised up for them, and followed him into the desert, thinking that they would be going to their promised land, which eventually they did after a generation of wandering. Finally, under new leadership, they entered their new land, and one of the first cities that they took was that of Jericho, where we meet Rahab, who was a prostitute who was despised by her own people, and she, being in that cultural trouble that she was, embraced the Hebrews, gave them friendly help, and Jericho was destroyed, and the Jews came into the land of Canaan, moved through, and eventually overthrew the majority of the cultures and religions that were there, that were so contrary to everything that was human. And then Paul mentions Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, and Samuel. And then he goes into a long description of the kind of suffering that those who are faithful to the cross, to the Christian faith, to Yahweh, face for their faith. So we read very, very disturbing, images of torture, of being sawn in half, being enchained, imprisoned, being wandering in deserts, in mountains, hiding in caves. These are the sort of things that one sees, one experiences when we focus on making ourselves holy, when we focus on loving God and loving our neighbor. Yes, it's very easy to just slide into the culture in which you live and to take the easy path, but that is not the path that leads to eternal life. He says, these, though commended through their faith, did not receive what was promised, since God had provided something better for us, that apart from us, they should not be made perfect. So what Paul's getting at here is this idea that even though those people before the incarnation were looking forward to the promises that God had given, God did not immediately reward them for their faith because the Messiah was coming. So those before the incarnation, those during the incarnation, and those after the incarnation all make up one people. We, as a whole, as faithful to Yahweh, are the people of God because we are living by faith, because we are not taking the easy path, the path of comfort and sin in whatever culture we live. Paul identifies Jesus as the author and finisher of our faith, which means that it's not just enough to have this nice, oh yeah, I believe in God, however God is defined. It's not embracing whatever kind of faith feels good to us. We need to remember that when the incarnation took place, Jesus came and defined, articulated, and fulfilled everything of the Old Covenant, bringing himself as a sacrifice, as a substitute for mankind in order to restore mankind to a right relationship with God. So Jesus established that, finished that, completed that, bringing restoration to all creation. So now, as the people of God, we need to embrace that which Jesus provided. We need to put in the effort to be holy, to not take the simple, easy path of comfort and pleasure. We need to acknowledge that Jesus, as the author of our faith, puts us in a position where we can be restored. And then as the finisher of our faith, that means we are working with him as we move through our lives toward eternity. And Christ, as our example, he did what he was supposed to do, what he was called to do, what he came to do. And he endured the rejection, he endured the abuse, he endured horrific death upon the cross. But since he is sinless, death could not hold him. He defeated death, he defeated the power of sin, and he opened up the way for us into eternal life.